mixed up his packs and he would reship my weed. This vendor knew that I was trying to get clean off his stims, and he told me I should flush the bag immediately. I should have taken his advice. Of course, I did not. My plan was to sell his bag to an acquaintance and make some extra money, so I held on to it for a few days until I could meet up with the guy and make the sale. The next morning, crawling out of bed at 5 a.m., my old addict brain possessed me again. Might as well just have a line before work, one last hurrah. No one will know but you. Plus, you're getting rid of it all in a couple days anyway. I did a small line, felt that old familiar feeling kick in. Even while I was chopping up the line, I remember thinking to myself, this is a horrible mistake. But the addict side won. After work, I decided to redose. I cut up a fat line this time. I did not have much experience with pure crystal and was used to taking pressed pills. I'm not sure how much I actually dosed the second time, but I knew as soon as it went up my nose that it was way too much. I didn't sleep that night, but I had been overstimmed so many times. I knew that as long as I didn't redose, I'd get through the day and be able to crash the second night. No sleep came the second night either, or the third night. That is when I became concerned because the meth should have been out of my system by then. It was on the evening of the fourth day that the hallucinations began. The first thing I remember is laying on my bed and reaching for a cup of water on my nightstand. I went to grab it and my hand passed right through. The strangest confusion washed over me. I tried to grab it again, and even though I could see the cup clear as day, my hand passed through like Patrick Swayze in Ghost. I looked away and looked back, and the cup was still there. Even when I knew it was a hallucination, I could not unsee it. Then the shadow people, creeping out of my closet bedroom where the outlines of slowly floating toward me. They looked like they were wearing hoodies and had no faces. They felt intelligent, and I could sense nothing but pure evil emanating from them. I started getting really worried and figured I should probably go to the hospital, but this meant I had to confess to my partner. I'd gone behind her back and relapsed. I'd been playing it off as if I was sick up to this point, but decided I needed to confess. I told her I believed I'd entered meth-induced psychosis and I might need to go to the hospital. She was very upset with me. We weighed the pros and cons of going to the emergency room. I didn't want to be locked up in a mental ward and knew if I was able to just fall asleep, I would wake up right as rain. My partner was so upset with me, she basically said I put myself in this situation, and if I want to go to the hospital, then I can call for an ambulance myself. I should mention that I probably downplayed the severity of my psychosis as to not freak her out and to lessen the blow of having broken my promise to stay clean once again to her. No. I decided I would try to sleep it off one more night. This is when I truly broke away and lost all touch with the real world. I remember thinking that my friend had directed a movie that he never told me about, and it was on YouTube, and I decided to put it on. The plot had something to do with multiple intersecting stories of these characters trying to survive an apocalyptic event. There was some kind of huge explosion that decimated most of the Earth. To my delight, my friend had placed one of the characters in the film on me and another one of our friends. He also based the character on himself. My character had called my two friends and we made plans to meet at his house and try to ride out the apocalypse together. This slowly started to change perspectives. I was no longer watching the plot unfold in a movie. I was now experiencing the movie as the character myself. I met up with one friend we can call Phil by somehow transporting to his house, and then we drove to my other friend's home we can call Bob, who lived in another city. It's just like... When we got to his house, we entered through a side door. He lived in an attached duplex, and next to him lived an elderly black couple and their two grandchildren. We did not make any contact with them yet, but I could see everything that was unfolding in their home as well, sort of like I was switching back and forth between first person and movie mode. We decided to hunker down and smoke some weed at Bob's house. The next thing I remember, I could see the entire destroyed Earth reconstruct itself. The world went from complete ruin back to normal in a matter of seconds, and there was some sense that this was a digital world, like when you die in a video game and then restart at the save point. However, we didn't get to rejoin the world, and we were stuck in this apocalyptic dimension, looking down over the pristine earth that went about its business as if nothing happened. All of the people who had died in the
Mother,
apocalypse were reset in the exact positions that they were in when the world ended, and
I'm
were
not
none the
going to
wiser
sleep.
anything had occurred at all. This included alternate versions of ourselves that got to finish living our lives while we were trapped in this purgatory. It turns out that the family that lived next to Bob were trapped in purgatory with us as well. There is an entire subplot that is very fuzzy to me now that involved us going back to Earth and murdering our
Never
own
heard of that.
replacements, living out their lives. But each time we did, the apocalypse would happen again, and we would end up in the exact situation. After some kind of eternity, myself, Phil, Bob, and Bob's neighbors had all accepted our fates. We were trapped in purgatory in this desolate wasteland forever. Then a new plot development occurred. The old man that lived next to Bob used to be a brilliant engineer and had all sorts of blueprints and science books in his basement. He had regretted wasting his life away with drinking and had let his great mind go to waste. Additionally, Bob and the oldest daughter that lived next door ended up having children, and
What?
somehow their children had children. We had used the old man's books and blueprints to reinvent the battery. We were then able to harness electricity and use it to watch the film that I thought my friend Phil had directed, which was the delusion I was currently living out. The old man preached to his children and great-grandchildren about how they should not waste their brains and to not follow in his footsteps. Then he would tell tales of the old world and would show the film. Some time had passed, and we had repopulated this desolate land with hundreds of people, but they were all deformed from inbreeding, and they didn't look completely human. They resembled something like orcs from The Lord of the Rings. They turned watching Phil's movie into a sort of ritual, and eventually an entire religion was built upon it. Meanwhile, the old
I
man
just
passed
can't
away,
take this
but the
shit.
youngest of his granddaughters continued to work endlessly on one of the inventions he had written a blueprint for. This device was completed, and then we somehow used it to open a portal down to Earth. Another device was invented that created glowing orbs that were human souls. It became our job to create all the new souls and send them down to Earth. These souls knew of Phil's movie and
I
of
wonder where that
us,
ball
and we
is.
became the gods and goddesses of a new religion for all of humanity. One of the orbs was the Messiah, and we put Jesus on Earth. Our intentions were always good, and we hoped for peace. After thousands of years, we had finally somehow figured out how to get to heaven. We had been trapped in limbo for so long. Heaven was through some sort of portal, and when you went through, you would stay there for 10,000 years and then return. The catch was that you could only go one time, but the experience was pure bliss and ecstasy. I didn't want to experience heaven without my partner and our son, so I had to wait for them to die and join me in limbo.
What the hell?
They said when they finally came, it was magical, and I sobbed when I saw them again, and we all walked into heaven together. The next thing I remember, the movie was over, and I was very confused. I kept peeking out the blinds to see if the outside world looked normal, or if the apocalypse had actually happened. I assumed that it must have happened and that I was now in heaven with my partner, as she was laying next to me. I woke her up and tried to explain to her that we were dead and to not go outside. I don't think she understood the extent of my psychosis at that point, because I could recognize her and where I was, and she got up and went to work. The series of the next set of delusions are all sort of jumbled together. I am not sure if I had his home to fit a strange new lifestyle. This involved being in constant flow with the sun. You would wake up each day and look into a mirror that reflected sunlight into your eyes for 20 seconds immediately each morning. When you slept, you would be snuggled against this strange pliable rod that would keep constant motion, rolling you over slowly. You would sleep every 4 hours for an hour. There was an alarm system that went off, the same song when it was time to wake up. The song was by some really popular teeny bopper band dressed up in Barney-style creature costumes. When you were not sleeping, you would be outside in constant sunlight. There were activities you would do until the sleep alarm went off.
How did this
Each
get so
activity involved some
fucked
sort of
up?
sun ritual-based exercise. At one point, I was trying to sleep on the couch that had an electric stovetop
The
inside of the
video.
cushions. I kept turning it on and burning myself, and it was painful and terrifying. There was a tractor on my father's property, and I took it for a joyride at night. I drove into town and stumbled upon a festival that seemed to be related to a holiday like Thanksgiving. All of the townspeople were gathered along the main street. I came across a group of police officers on a tall hill above the crowd. There was a giant pig they had on a leash. They were going to have a stuntman ride the pig down the hill and into the crowd of people. This was some kind of tradition that was held annually. I took it upon myself to hop on the pig and took it for an exhilarating joyride. The cops found it amusing, and the crowd all cheered when I made it all the way down the hill. I made a big speech into a microphone and went back to the
Ow!
house. They had captured the
Hurting
entire
myself.
thing on film, and I was able to share it with my family. This is when my fiance may have returned home because she was there with me at my dad's house. She kept telling me that it wasn't my dad's house, and I would be confused, and it would turn back into our house for just a moment, and
It's
then
like
back
he's
to my
having a
dad's.
psychosis or
This
some
is
shit.
when
I
I
don't
could feel
know.
my brain start to melt. I started to lose
This is
all
why you don't do
cognitive
meth.
function. I felt like an invalid. I was convinced I would have to live the rest of my life this way, or until I became a vegetable. Then my brother showed up. He was using some kind of drug and had moved into my house to take care of me. I kept finding dirty needles all over the place.
What is
I
the
didn't
point of
trust
smoking
him.
weed? That's what I don't
I
understand.
then walked into
What's the
my
point
room
of
and
smoking
caught him
weed?
in bed with
What's the
my
point of going
partner,
to
and they
sleep?
both had a
What's the
dirty
fucking
look of
point?
guilt on their faces. I'd lost most of my brain by then, was aware that I was very confused. I was convinced I just walked in on my own brother with my woman and began to get very upset. My
I
fiance
don't
was
understand
insisting
this
it didn't
shit.
happen and said she had to take me to the hospital. I thought she was lying. I wouldn't go with her. I then decided to call my mother because she would know the truth. I called and luckily she answered and told me
Cause
that
I
my
get
partner would
bored.
never do that to me and that I should trust her and go to the hospital. I remember a brief scene in the waiting room, trying to tell the person at the desk my personal information. I couldn't remember my name, my social, or what I had taken. Then I remember sitting in a chair and holding it in my lap. It was no longer attached to my head. My perspective was from my
No,
waist looking
I'm
up.
just chilling.
Then I was planning a
I'm just
meetup with my
watching
old
this
friends
cause it
Phil and
seems
Bob again
interesting.
in Disney World. There was a secret floor you can get off on an elevator there on one of the rides that no one knows about. You have to swim underwater to get there. I was in the hospital, but the hospital felt like a jail and I was laying in my bed. The hospital was also located in Disney.
Why every
I
time
would wait
somebody
for
go
my
through
friends to
something
get
like this,
there.
they go to the hospital? I'm not
This
going to no
room I
hospital.
was in had a strange familiarity, as if I'd been there one time
Ah!
before.
My arm is
I
about
was
to pop.
alone in a bed with a television and an old-fashioned radio. One wall was barred like a jail cell, and it was nighttime. I caught out of the corner of my eye these tiny moving people. They were my friends there to meet me, along with other people I didn't know. They had shrunk themselves, swam through an underground tunnel, and then taken an elevator into my
I already
room.
did that shit.
They needed to get something, and I
Lesson
helped them by
learned.
letting them climb across my body. They thanked me by eating the dead skin off my arm on a recent wound that had begun to scab over. They were very happy I had helped them, and then went back the way they had came. The next day they visited again. However, this time they were wheeled into my room by
Just
an
wanna
orderly.
be.
They stood in a circle on top of a cot, holding curtains around themselves to hide. I
Yeah,
entered the
my
curtain to
vision was starting to
discover they
become
were all
blurry.
nude.
I
They were
wasn't
selling drugs
hallucinating
and
yet, but if I would have
weapons.
went
Two
any
of them
more
had rats
longer,
that
I would have
lived off of
started.
their flesh and never left their bodies, like a parasite. They would nest in their pubic hair. They thought it would be
That was like the
exciting to
worst
take me
time
on their
ever.
drug run through the hospital, so they all
I
stood
was
around my
crying and
bed.
everything. I just could not
This was
take
a
it.
carefully orchestrated operation. The orderly was in on the deal, would come retrieve the cot and bring it from unit to unit to sell contraband to the residents. Then I was back in my room at night again. My friend had shrunken themselves and entered my room. They gave me a potion to shrink myself, and we escaped through a crack in the old-fashioned
I'm
radio.
not crazy.
We took an elevator that opened into a body of water. The potion
It's
allowed us to
just
breathe
I don't be
underwater, but
having
it only
nothing to
lasted a
do, and
short
that
while.
irritates the fuck out of me because I need something to
Under
do.
my floor, we surfaced
I had
into a
something to
secret
do, but now my
chamber.
schedule
This was a
changing,
secret
so
place where they had a
I
huge
gotta
stash of
regroup
drugs
again.
hidden. We were going to take the drugs and then go on all the rides at Disney World. Then the cops showed up. We were all interviewed separately by a woman. Phil then turned out to
Mm.
be an officer as
Then once
well and had to play
this
it off
boy
like he
come
was
here,
working undercover,
we
even
still
though
not
he
gonna
was
do
really
shit.
committing the
Do the
crime
same
with
shit every
us.
day.
He
And
then
I asked
tried to
like he don't
interrogate
like to go
Bob and I
outside or
about how the
nothing.
drugs got there and
I
pin
like to
it
go
on us.
outside. I
We
don't
both
know.
knew that
I
he
think the
supplied the
scenery is
bulk of the
killing me.
drugs. He finally felt so
Ow,
guilty
my
that he
arm
broke
keep
down
on.
in tears and confessed. We were all arrested. At first, Bob fled the scene, but they
He's
caught him.
working right
They
now.
put us in 3 rooms in the top of a building.
Till
I kept walking into the
couple
wrong
minutes.
room every time I wanted to use the
He's supposed to
restroom
bring
and was
some
reprimanded. They kept
stuff.
saying, "Nope, that's not your room. It's this one right here."
Kind of sleepy, honestly, but I'm not going
Phil
to
and I
sleep.
slept the whole time. However, Bob lost his shit. It turned out he had a mental disability and started screaming nonsense and crying like a baby. I thought it
What?
might have been some sort of defense mechanism to deny what was happening around him. I remember being envious that he was able to escape reality and the complete horror when realizing the situation I'd gotten into. Drug charges, prison, armed guards.
That's just not gonna
I
happen.
slept, and then I ate a meal and slept more. Then I
Hey,
wake
yeah.
up and they tell me I'm going home. I am in a hospital.
Yeah,
I'm on the
hey,
phone with my
that's
partner
just
and
not
she
gonna
will be
happen.
here in a
I
few
just know that
minutes.
I'm not gonna do
I
nothing
check out of the
fun with him.
hospital with a discharge sheet reading psychosis, unspecified type, and to make an appointment with my PCP within 3 days. I was so confused for the first couple of weeks. Writing this has been extremely therapeutic for me. In reality, I was only out of the hospital in psychosis for about 5 hours, and then spent the next 4 days in a hospital bed. None of that happened. I was a lunatic, ranting and raving to myself. I am able to find some strength in my mental fortitude. I know that was a delusion. It is feeling more and more like a dream each day that passes. I've been extremely humbled. This experience has changed me forever. I value my sanity and my mental health so much more now. I'm dedicated to finally dealing with my addiction issues and treating my mental and physical health like a temple. Please let this be a warning sign. Meth is a terrible drug, and stimulants in general are playing with fire for anyone with an addictive personality type.
Me.
My
I gotta
advice
re-listen to
is
this
to
because
just
y'all
stay
distracted
away.
me.
I know I will never touch it again. You would be outside in constant sunlight. There were activities you would do until the sleep alarm went off. Each activity involved some sort of sun ritual-based exercise.
This got like 2,000
At one point, I was trying to sleep on a couch that had an electric stovetop inside of the cushions. I kept turning it on and burning myself, and it was painful and tearing. There was a tractor on my father's property.
I'm
and
never
I took it
doing
for a
meth,
joyride
like
at night. I drove into
that's
town and
just I don't
stumbled
know how
upon
that
a
would even
festival
happen.
that seemed to be
I
related
was
to a
debating
holiday like
being a stripper for
Thanksgiving.
like a couple minutes
All of
ago.
the townspeople were gathered
I let
along
it
the
go.
main street.
I just
I
can't seem to
came
take off
across
my
a
clothes
group
in
of
front of a
police
nigga.
officers on a tall hill above the crowd. There was a giant pig they had on a leash. They were going to have a stuntman ride the pig down the hill and into the crowd of people. This was some kind of tradition that was held annually. I took it upon myself to hop on the pig and took it for an exhilarating joyride. The cops found it amusing, and the crowd all cheered when I made it all the way down the hill. I made a big speech into a microphone and then went back to the house. They had captured the entire thing on film, and I was able to share it with my family. This is when my fiancée may have returned home because she was there with me at my dad's house. She kept telling me that it wasn't my dad's house, and I would be confused, and it would turn back into our house for just a moment.
Ooh, this channel is kind of cool. You know, I always complain and then God show it for me. My God, I'm so worried. Hold on, I don't want to watch that. This channel look good. I just gotta find which drug I wanna look into. Cause you know my dad was drugged and he was laced, so maybe this could help. This one's about Benadryl. I've never even Torah. What the hell is the Torah? I want to see if I want to see what? I want to see fentanyl. But it's a lot of pages like this. I didn't went into the rabbit hole. Girl, they're gonna have me doing drugs on here. I'm into it. Look up Benadryl. I don't never took Benadryl.
Floating away. Perfect.
A few months ago, I had an overwhelming experience with the substance taken as generic Benadryl. I wrote this soon after it happened. It was a snowy, windy night. I went over to Jay's house to sleep over. We had planned on taking the drill, as we called it. We hadn't had much experience with it before this, me twice, him once. It was mysterious to us. The time before we had taken it together, we took 15 pills. We had cloudy electric visuals form over everything.
They took 15 pills. Why would anybody try this out? Like, like who the fuck would take 15 Benadryls? I never had Benadryl. I swear to God, I don't think I never had no Benadryl. Ever. But I heard about it because people always be like, take a Benadryl. But I ain't never had no Benadryl. What? I ain't never heard of that before.
And felt very stoned. Time passed so slow it was mind-blowing, but we didn't see anything other than the electric jelly. This time,
I assume this is how people start taking drugs. Like, I just assume that because they be bored. Is it a pill? If it's a pill, I don't think I never took that shit for real. I ain't never just said I'm finna go get a Benadryl. Now I always say I'm finna get a leave. Had one. My phone finna die out, so I'm gonna have to go. I gotta watch these because now I'm in a different dimension. This is exactly what I asked God for. I was just gonna cry about it. I'm happy now.
were ready for a full-blown visual fiesta. His parents were out for the night to return probably after the bars closed around 2. At 9, we swallowed 30 each.
30.
15 minutes later, we were feeling the sleepy heaviness come on. We played some Perfect Dark N64 game and waited. Soon, things get a little blurry in the memory. All of a sudden, Jay is looking at me through the window outside. It is winter, and I react feeling slightly concerned at first. Then he disappears. I run out the door to look for him and see all these people at the barbecue outside. There were about 7 guys standing around a grill trying to keep warm.
All right, y'all.
It was dark, so I could only see their outfits.